Good afternoon and welcome back to what's becoming a series of events today as we launch Just Ask. Good afternoon in the UK and just about good morning where our next guest is coming in from I think on the east coast of the States. I've invited Dawnna St to join me. Now, Dawnna's story is probably one of the most compelling stories that I share in Just Ask, and that's among some very, very powerful stories. But it moved me when we spoke. I didn't know a lot of this about her. She just had reached out to me in a forum when I was chatting to people in America about some interesting stories for the book, and she said, I think I have one. And we know each other from the speaking circuit. I didn't know her backstory, and I was really blown away by it. And then people who've worked on the book with me in editing it and proofing it have all mentioned Dawnna's story and how it's affected them. So I really wanted to get her on today to share some of that with you. So in what's becoming time-honoured fashion, if you can call it time-honoured over a few hours, I'm just going to read through the beginning of how I shared Dawnna's story in the book, and then we'll invite her on to tell us a little bit more. So in typical Andy punning terms, it's called Dawnna Rising. Dawnna St provides a classic example of someone who was conditioned to be strong. And if you meet Dawnna today, you will be impressed by a very successful, independent and powerful woman. But as is so often the case, the image Dawnna presents to the world doesn't tell the whole story. Dawnna told me that she was over 40 years old before she could truly trust another person and easily let them help her. It was a skill that she had to learn through brutal lessons, and it took 2 suicide attempts before she could really let someone in. Born just after Martin Luther King was assassinated and raised in an American South still experiencing segregation in the early 1970s, Dawnna was the daughter of an African-American mother and part Jamaican, part Italian father. At the age of 7, her family moved from California to Florida, from a very middle-class mixed-race area that she describes as a melting pot to Miami's hood. With dark curly hair and hazel eyes, Dawnna had more of a Latino appearance, and as a result didn't fit into the predominantly African-American Miami neighborhood where her family moved in with her grandmother. Dawnna was bullied because of her appearance. She just didn't look like the other kids. The shift from suburban California to the poor segregated Florida neighborhood riven with racism was a real culture shock for the young girl. That shock deepened when her mother moved them out of their grandmother's home into a predominantly Cuban area. Not being Cuban and not speaking any Spanish, she found herself in a fight. Sorry, missed a line. There's the risks of reading. Not being Cuban and not speaking any Spanish, the bullying and racism got worse. Told to stand up for herself, she found herself in a fight every week. After a while, you lose your innocence and vulnerability, Dawnna told me, and the ability to be honest and true. Asking for help is a huge weakness. You better stand up for yourself. That was kind of my upbringing. Like Pagine, who you'll read about in another chapter, Dawnna found that the more she fought, the more respect she would earn. Her vulnerable and positive emotions had to be tucked away and hidden from the world. I had this really tough, hard exterior. In a moment's notice, I could turn a joke into an attack to ensure that everyone knew that just because I laughed at something, it didn't mean I was weak. But on the inside, I was soft and hurting. After I instigated a fight with someone, I would cry in the shower or into a pillow at night. The next day, it would start all over again. So you can see just from that opening that Dawnna had a very tough upbringing, and that carried on as her journey progressed. And there was one particular quote that Dawnna shared with me in our conversation that I shared in the book that really jumped out, and it stood as a phenomenal metaphor for the message that I'm trying to share in Just Ask. Dawnna said, I'll never starve if you keep on feeding me. I'll never starve if you keep on feeding me. So I thought that would be a good point at which to bring Dawnna in and ask her to share just a little bit more of that story and how she got to that point of that line of saying that to someone else. So hello, Dawnna. Thanks for joining me. We can all see the curly hair and the hazel eyes now. So thanks for joining me, and thank you for sharing so openly and vulnerably in Just Ask.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me here. And it was so funny because listening to you read that, I could just feel the emotions coming back up, right? And it's,
Yeah.
first of all, amazing writing. Wow, it was really good.
Thank you. I mean, I feel the emotions reading it out again myself. Your sound cut out there, so I hope we're not going to have a disaster at the beginning. Your sound's been absolutely fine until we start chatting. I think I've got you back. I think you got you back. So we may dip in and out. Hopefully not. But thank you. Yeah, I mean, I felt that emotion reading it out, and I think it's a very compelling story. And as I said, that's just the beginning. Your story goes to some very dark places, but comes out into the light at the end of it. We may not go into the whole story now, but there are a couple of things I wanted to explore. The first one is this line about I'll never starve to death if you keep on feeding me. So can you just share how you came to actually utter those words?
Absolutely. I had gotten to the point where I knew I was going to die. It was a matter of starvation. I was homeless at the time, and I knew I was going to starve to death. And one of the most important things to me was to be clean of all things. There is just this weird thing that if my mom or the police or whomever was going to find my body, I wanted my body to be clean. And so I found this local uh, fitness club, as it would be. And there was a gentleman there who used to clean the windows and clean the equipment and hated it every morning. And so I bartered a shower. If I could shower, I would clean the windows for him. And so he allowed me to clean the windows after the shower. He was not gonna let me he was like, "Please shower first." So, I took a shower and I cleaned the equipment and I drank as much water as I could while I was in the shower. But while I was in there, when I came out, he had cereal bars for me. And so he's like, "Here's a cereal bar. You can have a cereal bar." And this went on for a couple of days, and I told him, if you keep feeding me, I'm not gonna starve to death. Like, I can't starve if you feed me. And that was the thing. Like, I came there to get clean from my impending death of starvation. Like, stop giving me food. Like, you're totally thwarting my plans here, you know?
And you had huge trust issues with him, didn't you? Because he was just helping you from the goodness of his heart, and it was something that at that point you found difficult to cope with.
Yeah, I didn't understand why he would help me or what he wanted from me or, and he didn't want anything. He wanted the windows cleaned and the gym equipment cleaned and you know, but he didn't want anything, and that was something that was very difficult to understand. Why would someone give me something without wanting something in return?
And that, as I read in that introduction, that's something that really stuck with you till your 40s. And this was one of the main things I wanted to get into on this conversation is, how do you overcome an inability to accept help from other people? Because I think that's something that a lot of people struggle with.
And I'll tell you, I think the number one way to overcome that, the one thing you have to have is vulnerability. And I didn't have that for years. I wasn't allowed to be vulnerable. Was being vulnerable was a weakness. But until you can really sit down and look at yourself and see that there are parts of you that are fractured, that are not there, that someone can help you with, until you can openly and honestly admit that, you can't really get help.
So what was the turning point for you
In getting help.
in accepting help?
Oh, and in accepting help. I think I had gotten to the point where, it's so funny because it feels like forever ago now. But I think I had gotten to a point where, um, in many ways, there was one person that I trusted, that I actually trusted, and that I spoke to and didn't judge me. That was the first part. Like, I spoke to someone who didn't judge me.
Mm.
Um, that was the coolest thing I'd ever experienced in my life. And so when I said that there was something that I had a challenge with, they were so openly and willingly and easily just, "Here you go. I got you. I got this." And because I was vulnerable in that moment, and because I had already recognized that there was no judgment, that they really didn't want anything in return. And I think sometimes that's part of the fear of, "You're gonna do something nice for me, so what do you want? What are you looking for? What are you trying to get?" And to accept that someone was doing something for me that was kind because they wanted to do something that was kind, that was a little tough. And sometimes still today, it's something that I struggle with. I'm always looking at, so what is the barter? I'm
Yeah.
always asking that question. What am I gonna owe you? What is the debt? It's one thing to be thankful. It's another thing to have a debt of gratitude, right? So now I owe you something. What is that?
Yeah, it was interesting when we talked for the book. You said that when you were homeless, you went in to the local town because you were living out in the woods, and you would busk because you couldn't just beg. You had to give something in exchange for the money that you needed. Um,
Yes. Had to barter. Could not.
yeah, yeah.
Could not. It had to be. It had to be an exchange. It could not be just accepting anyone giving me something.
And you even went back to the guy at the YMCA for whom you washed the windows once you started earning money and tried to pay him for all the breakfasts and showers.
Yeah, he
Yeah.
wouldn't accept it.
Yeah. Nigel Risner's commented, what an awesome woman we love, Dawnna. And I know you know Nigel. And
Yeah.
Nigel and I have seen you on stage. You're a very powerful, imposing figure. He's also just said, "Oh my God, Dawnna St is singing." You're a very powerful, imposing figure on stage. You're a very confident figure, and that's very much the way the world experiences you. I've noticed certainly over the last few months on Facebook, you're talking a lot more from a vulnerable standpoint,
Yes.
which fits really well with what we're talking about in the book. And I think one of the core messages I try and get across in the book is that you shouldn't judge people on just the externals. I share stories of Leonard Cohen and Tom Petty sharing their vulnerabilities. Leon McKenzie, Premiership footballer, how he was after he scored a winner against Manchester United, and we're too quick to judge people on what we see externally. How has your increased vulnerability online been received by your network and by the people who follow you?
There is actually, it's fine. It's quite interesting. I have two factions of people. The first faction of people will send me a note and say, "Are you okay?" They they think something's wrong. They're
Yeah,
like, "She must be broken. Something's wrong. What is she doing? Is she all right?" That's the first thing. And the other faction of people are going, "Wow, what a powerful lesson. Thank you." What most people don't realize is that, I guess you would call this the height of vulnerability, is that I am openly sharing my growth in front of
yeah,
everyone. I'm openly saying, "Hey, this is something that I learned." It doesn't mean anything is wrong, right? But maybe I already went through the lesson and now I'm sharing the lesson. And a couple of them have been things like, someone else's opinion does not create the narrative for your story.
yeah.
And so you shouldn't write your story based on their opinion. And just telling people how I got to that point or got there. Yeah, I do get a lot of people that go, "Are you okay? Are you all right?" I'm like, "I'm fine. I'm fine. I'm fine." So yeah, they're used to me being very much, sarcastic, quick-witted or whatever, and maybe believe that my tear ducts have been removed or something. But I'm also the person that people who know me and know me well recognize that they can pick up the phone at 2 o'clock in the morning and call me and cry and be upset. And I have no judgment and I don't want anything in return. And I just want to help them because I know what it feels like to be there.
And do you find that once you start the process of sharing, it becomes easier and more natural? I mean, I was interviewed about the book today on a live at lunchtime, and I answered a question, and at the end, Olga, who interviewed me, said, "Thank you for being so vulnerable." And I didn't even feel it was a vulnerable thing, but I think that once you start the process, perhaps it becomes easier. Is that something that you found?
I think it's one of those things that when you share the scariest thing about you that you can share, then and you think you're alone, by the way, when you have this issue. You think you're alone, you think you're foolish, you think no one else is going through it. You know, you really believe that. And then you say, "Hey, I have this issue." And then all of a sudden somebody will say, "Oh my gosh, I have that issue too."
Yeah.
And suddenly you're not alone. You know, you're not the person out there by yourself on the island. You realize there are other people there and they're with you. And not only are they with you, they've been through that challenge and they have a solution and some guidelines and some help. But yeah, going out there, you know, I equate it to there's a video where it shows this guy is standing in a middle of a crowd and he just starts dancing by himself and everyone's looking at him, and then someone comes up and they start dancing with him, and then before you know, there's a crowd of people dancing with him. And it talks about, while it's very scary to, you know, go out there and dance by yourself, when you realize that other people want to dance with you, it becomes that much easier.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely get that. Dawnna, thank you. We've got another comment. It's my mum. Who helped me with the book, worked hard on the book, and she's just said it's so great to meet you after helping with the book and reading about you. So I'm sure there'll be many people who read your story in the book and it really resonates with them and they'll feel strongly about it. And I really appreciate you sharing both then and today as well. Thanks for your support.
It's nice to virtually meet mom too.
Thank you, Dawnna. I, I hope you've enjoyed the few interviews today. I will try and grab 2 or 3 more people tomorrow and share some more interviews. I guess I'll just reach out to them and just ask.